The Guilty is Netflix's newest movie about a demoted police officer assigned to a call dispatch desk who is conflicted when he receives an emergency call from a kidnapped woman. This movie stars Jake Gyllenhaal and it was directed by Anton Fuqua, who made the likes of The Equalizer, Southpaw with Jake Gyllenhaal, Training Day and many other pretty damn good movies. The other thing to mention right at the start of this review is that the movie is based on a Danish version of the exact same movie. It's more of a bigger budget, you know, a little more star power, plus Netflix behind it, plus Anton Fuqua and their kind of rehash of The Guilty, the Danish version. The movie predominantly takes place in one setting inside the call dispatch place, the call center. When I say the majority, I mean 99.9% of the movie, other than a couple of flashbacks or visions, I guess, Jake Gyllenhaal's character's having. When I watched the trailer for this movie, it looked like a really intense, high stakes mystery with a lot of intrigue behind it. And it looked like a very interesting movie. And of course, it's a Netflix movie. And as I've been saying on this channel for months, Netflix don't seem to make very good original movies anymore. A lot of the stuff they've made this year has been at best. And unfortunately, that theory still holds up after watching The Guilty, because it might be one of the worst movies I've watched this year. I seem to be saying that a lot lately. Now, as I say, I went into this one with a lot of high hopes that the movie was going to be really good. And the movie starts off at an interesting pace. Jake Gyllenhaal, I believe, is a very good actor. He's been in some very good movies down the years. And for a movie that's going to focus majoritively on one actor, we see one actor on screen the majority of the time, Jake Gyllenhaal is a decent choice for that because, as I mentioned, he's a pretty good actor. Now, as the story unfolds, there is some interesting reveals throughout. However, the movie is an hour and a half long, and they have about 40 minutes of story at most, which they end up stretching out over an hour and a half, which never works well. What you're left with is a movie that's drawn out, and by the end of it, you're just hoping that at any point now, they're just going to cut to black and it's going to say the end. As I mentioned, at the beginning, there's a lot of intrigue to it. The woman rings in, reveals she's kidnapped. Jake Gyllenhaal is going into super crazy mode all of a sudden. You also got this side story of what's happening with Jake Gyllenhaal's character because he's getting calls from press. His wife won't talk to him. We hear that he's got a trial going on and you're like, what's going on here? All this kind of sets up possible avenues for where the movie is going, and that's the main intrigue of the movie, is where's all this going? Is the call Jake Gyllenhaal's taking related to his own situation? Maybe he's reliving a situation in a courtroom. We're just seeing his side of the story. Or maybe it's a completely separate thing. It turns out it was the latter. Trying not to give away too many spoilers here. Now, movies like this, where they're set predominantly in one location, are always quite interesting. One of my favorite movies of all time is 12 Angry Men, which is set entirely inside one room. Well, two rooms, because they go outside a little bit. But for the most part, that movie takes place in a juror's room as they deliberate of whether someone was guilty or not. So movies like that do work. But the problem with this movie is majority of the movie were just focused on an extreme close-up of Jake Gyllenhaal's face, which, you know, from a cinematic point, isn't great cinematic stuff. Technical wording for you right there. So the movie doesn't really have any good visuals to it. You know, they used a decent camera, they color corrected it, They probably use good lenses. And similarly, there's nothing there for the sound to do spectacularly. You're not going to have an amazing score on a movie like this, so it all comes down to the story and the storytelling. As I mentioned earlier, I think Jake Gyllenhaal has been in some very good movies and put some very good performances down the years. Something like Nightcrawler comes to mind. Southpaw, which he did with Anton Fuqua, is a pretty good movie as well. But in this, as the movie drags on, especially in the later part, he's very bad. Now, I don't think he was given a lot to work with here. When you're shooting a movie like this, where you're basically shooting a phone call or various phone calls, Jake Gyllenhaal wouldn't actually be having these phone calls at the time. He'd be basically talking to someone on set who'd be saying the other lines. ADR afterwards, when they redo his lines, then they'll add in their voice on the phone afterwards. But it leads to a very disjointed performance, which culminates with a scene right at the very end. Now, I don't want to give away too many spoilers here, but I don't think this one spoils it too much because there's not really a whole lot to spoil here. But right at the very end, Jake Gyllenhaal is in a bathroom stall and he's sitting on the ground, he's puked in the toilet for some reason, and they have shown an aerial shot, kind of, well, not quite an aerial shot, but an above shot of the stall. You can clearly see the puke in the toilet and Jake Gyllenhaal just sitting on the ground beside it as he's on the phone to someone. And someone says to him, if you do this, you will never see your daughter again. Which leads to Jake Gyllenhaal pulling a facial expression similar to this. So he does that like 3 times. I guess that's crying. But you also had other problems within this movie, that some of the big reveals in it, they don't really have any impact behind them, because number one, you don't see any of it. There's no real, you know, tension building moments. There's a couple of good reveals in it, but you don't see any of it. You don't hear a majority of it. So a lot of the reveals fall flat. But as I mentioned, it all comes down to whether the story was interesting. And personally, I think the story wasn't brilliantly told. I don't think the acting was particularly good in it, either from the people on the phone or from Jake Gyllenhaal, which I think is out of character, but there you go. And it's a shame, because with this movie, when I started it, I was like, okay, this is going to be really interesting. And it started out really well. And as it bore on, good choice of words here, bore on, it got more and more boring and stretched out. And I just wanted it to end. And the ending comes along, and it's just such an unsatisfying ending. There's no big tie up at the end, but even still, the story as it was going along wasn't told well enough for you to really care about the character. Jake Gyllenhaal's character is so weird. He has these mood swings throughout the movie where he's just talking to someone, and then he'll like slap all the stuff off his desk, and he's desperately trying to help the people on the phone, and then it doesn't go his way, and then he calms down and he talks to someone on the phone like he's talking to his best buddy, and then he's angry again a couple of minutes later, and then he's talking to his ex-wife and they're kind of calm, and it's like 2 a.m. for some reason, and then he gets angry again, and he's just constantly getting angry and upset. He's going through a whole rainbow of emotions as the movie wears on. Then you've also got a weird little time frame in the movie, because at one point it's like 9:30 at night, and he's trying to ring his ex-wife so he could say goodnight to his daughter. She's trying to ring him at some stage, but then the next time we see his phone, it's like 2:30 in the morning, and his ex-wife is ringing him saying, "Don't ring me at 2:30 in the morning." That's weird, something to that effect. And then his colleague comes in and says, "Hey Joe," I think it was Joe was the name. He says, "Hey Joe, the day people are in. Our shift's over, let's go." And Joe says, "I'm gonna stick around for a while. I want to see out this case." Joe looks at his phone again, and it's still 2:30 in the morning. And then the next time we see his phone, it's like 6:30 in the morning. Time just jumps very rapidly within the movie, but not consecutively. Like the time jumps are very random within the movie, which at times leads to think that maybe his character is going through some psychotic episode himself. But that's not where the movie ends up. It's very bland at the end, and it's very disappointing overall. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the movie had big potential, and maybe I just built it up a little bit too much in my own mind, but personally, I was very, very disappointed with The Guilty. Although maybe I should have just expected it, because Netflix do not make good movies. 2 movies I'm looking forward to in the future: Army of Thieves and The Harder They Fall. By the end of the week, we'll have trailer actions out for both if we haven't already. Both of those look like pretty damn good movies, but because they've got that little Netflix badge on them, my expectations are tempered a little bit, because Netflix just can't seem to get it right with these movies. They're just throwing money at a wall and nothing is sticking. The Guilty is the latest case of that. So then we get down to the rating out of 10. What would I give The Guilty out of 10? And after giving out about so much right there, I can only give it a maximum of 3 out of 10. And personally, I would say to anyone out there who hasn't seen The Guilty, don't waste your time. Just find something else to watch. Thank me later. But for those of you who have seen The Guilty on Netflix starring Jake Gyllenhaal, I would love to know your opinions all about this movie, where you loved it, where you hated it. Tell me all about it in the comments section below. And of course, if you're new here to the Movie Film Show, Karl's Movie Film Show, I'm Karl by the way. If you're new here, I would greatly appreciate if you jump below this video, hit that subscribe button for new content every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday right now. Sometimes we do an extra one, sometimes. But with all that being said and done, thank you so much for watching.